Last Friday, I was sitting here in my apartment in Bangkok when suddenly the floor beneath me started to shift. It wasn't a massive earthquake, but it was enough to make the building creak, and my brain switched from just another day mode to survival mode in about 2 seconds flat. And as I checked my messages afterward, some panic, some puzzled, it dawned on me. Even something that small, that quick, can have a profound effect. Not just on me, but on everyone around me. Partner, friends, colleagues, clients, teams. We like to believe we leave our emotions at the door when we clock in, but truthfully, they always come with us. That earthquake made me think about how teams deal with emotional disruptions. Not just the big headline grabbing events, but the quiet ones too. Personal losses, health scares, political instability, climate anxiety, even just living through a pandemic or an earthquake. Today, we're going to talk about something most teams never name, but almost every team feels. How trauma, big or small, can quietly shape behavior, trust, and performance at work. More importantly, how to recognize it and lead with more compassion and clarity because of it. Let's jump in. Hey, my name is Greg from RenU. I'm a master coach helping people, teams, and organizations to know, design, and become themselves. RenU and I are here to help you live a life where you have control. Here is something we often forget in the corporate world. Trauma doesn't wait outside the office while we sip our coffee or open PowerPoint. It walks in with us, quiet, casually. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk explains that trauma isn't just about dramatic, life-altering events. It's about how the body responds when we feel overwhelmed, helpless, or unsafe, and can't process the experience. And when those emotions stay unresolved, they show up later, usually at the worst possible time and in the worst possible form. You see it in the team member who shuts down during feedback, the colleague who micromanages every tiny detail, the manager who avoids difficult conversation like they're allergic to honesty. These are not personality flaws. Often they are survival strategies that were never updated. Trauma does not necessarily show up as a dramatic outburst. It can show up in patterns: hypervigilance, disconnection, control, people-pleasing, emotional shutdown. Van der Kolk described it as a kind of living memory. The body reacts to the present as if it's the past, which means your team isn't just reacting to what you said in the meeting. They might be reacting to what someone else said 10 years ago that felt just as threatening. That's why creating psychological safety isn't a bonus. It's a baseline. Because when people don't feel safe, their brains literally go offline. Prefrontal cortex, the part we need for logic, empathy, creativity, gone, offline. They're operating from the amygdala. So when you sense that tension in the room, that passive-aggressive email chain, that weird silence after a decision, don't just ask what's wrong with them. Ask what happened to them. Because whether it was a childhood wound or an earthquake that rattles their sense of stability, trauma lives in the nervous system. And it doesn't clock in and clock out. Here is a reflection moment. Think about the people on your team right now, or even yourself. Where have you seen reactions that felt outsized, defensive, withdrawn? What if that wasn't about the situation, but about something deeper? Jot down one moment that puzzled you and reframe it with this lens of trauma response. What shifts in your perspective? Let's go back to the Bangkok earthquake for a second. It only lasted maybe for a minute or two. Considering it is a city with 17 million people and countless number of buildings, only one collapsed. And that is tragic. Something invisible did collapse for many people that day. Their sense of safety. That's often how trauma works. It's not always loud or visible. It can be small, sudden, and deeply unsettling, especially if it echoes something that's already happened in someone's life. As Van der Kolk writes, trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It's the current imprint of that pain on mind, brain, and body. So even if someone isn't saying, "I'm shaken up," you might see it in their silence during the Monday meeting, or in their unusual sharp tone replying to a Slack message, or in their sudden need to triple check every little thing you ask them to do. The weird thing is, most of the time, even they don't realize what's going on, because the body remembers long after the brain has moved on. That's why someone can be triggered by something as simple as a tone of voice, a deadline, or a change in seating arrangement. It's not about the thing, it's about what that thing represents in their nervous system. Dr. Van der Kolk talks a lot about this in his work with combat veterans and abuse survivors. But the same principle applies in the office. Because our nervous system doesn't care whether the threat is a battlefield or a project deadline that feels like failure is fatal. And external events don't have to be personal to impact performance. Think about this. Political unrest in someone's home country, a natural disaster in a place where their family lives, news of layoffs, a past burnout cycle re-triggered by a high-pressure week. These moments echo in our bodies like aftershocks. They don't always speak in words, but they always speak. And when they show up in the room, we label it as low moral or lack of engagement instead of what it really is, the nervous system doing its best to survive. Ask yourself this. What external events, global or personal, might be quietly shaping how you and your team are showing up right now? What unseen emotional echoes might be bouncing off the walls of your Zoom calls or office halls? You don't need to know all the answers, but you do need to be curious enough to ask the question. If you want to learn more about how to avoid assumptions and truly know what is going on with people around you, then check this out. You like this video so far? Then you know what to do. Also subscribe and put on the notifications if you want to receive content like this every week. Check out the other videos from famous YouTube channels in the video description. It's always good to look at the topic through multiple lenses. Now you might be thinking, okay, Greg, this is all fascinating, but how do I actually spot trauma in a team setting? Like, I don't have a therapy degree. I've got a budget review at 4. That's fair. The good news is you don't need to diagnose anyone, but you do need to understand how trauma speaks through behavior. Dr. Van der Kolk describes trauma as a response that hijacks the body and the brain. It turns our survival systems up to max volume. What does that look like in the workplace? Let me introduce you to the 4 Fs: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I'll start with fight. That teammate who gets combative in meetings, argues over every detail, not just necessarily strong will. They might be reacting to a perceived threat, like losing control, credibility, or face. They fight to protect themselves. Then flight. The one who suddenly has a call whenever conflicts arises, who goes Slack, Teams for days. Not flaky, just escaping. Their nervous system is saying, get out now, this isn't safe. Then we have freeze. The colleague who stares blankly when asked a tough question or goes quiet during change. That's the body saying, play dead, and maybe the threat will pass. And the fourth one is fawn. The people pleaser who says yes to everything, even when overwhelmed. That's not loyalty, it's a survival move. If I'm useful, maybe I'll be safe. Those 4 responses can be mistaken for personality traits or performance issues. But underneath, they're often trauma-coded behaviors. Van der Kolk reminds us that trauma survivors often lose their sense of time. The brain responds to now as if it's then. So your direct report isn't avoiding feedback because they're lazy. They might be reacting as if you were their hypercritical parent from childhood. This is why traditional performance management often falls short. You can't coach a fight or flight response with logic alone. You need safety, presence, and patience. Let's bring this into your world. Think of a recent high-stress team moment, a tough deadline, a team conflict, a sudden change. Now ask yourself, who got louder? That's fight. Who disappeared? That's flight. Who froze or became passive? That's freeze. Who agreed to everything, even what didn't make sense? That's fawn. Now you. Where do you tend to go when things get hard? We all have a default. Name it. Own it. That's how transformation begins. So now we know trauma shows up at work. The question is, what do we do about it? How do we stop walking on eggshells and start building something solid? First, let's be clear. We're not here to fix people. We are here to create environments where people can feel safe enough to heal, grow, and show up fully. If the body keeps the score, Van der Kolk writes, being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Not being right, not being productive, feeling safe. Which means your job as a leader, a teammate, or even just as a conscious human is to be a regulator, not a reactor. Let's review some practical tools you can use. team check-ins with emotional cues. Start meetings with what's present for you right now. Or use a red, yellow, green system. Green, I'm focused and calm. Yellow, I'm here, but a little tense. Red, I'm struggling, emotionally or mentally. This isn't about oversharing. It's about context. If someone's in the red, maybe they don't need to lead the brainstorm today. They need space, not shame. Second one is regulate the body, not just the calendar. Trauma lives in the nervous system, so healing needs to include the body. Try a few things. Have walking meetings. Take 2-minute breathing resets. Do some grounding exercises before big decisions. These are not wellness perks. They are neurological hacks to keep teams in the window of tolerance, where they can actually think and collaborate. The third one is name the dynamics, not the drama. Instead of, "It's difficult," try, "I noticed tension in that moment. What was happening for you?" This shifts the conversation from judgment to curiosity. Safety isn't silence. It's naming things without punishment. When people feel safe to speak the truth, even if it's messy, you build trust. And this exercise is key. Leaders go first. If you want people to open up, model what it looks like. You don't have to trauma dump on people, but saying something like, "Last week really threw me off balance, and I noticed I was more controlling than usual. I'm working on that." This isn't a weakness, it's leadership. Van der Kolk says that traumatized people are terrified of conflict. But when a leader shows that conflict can be met with care instead of collapse, healing begins. One interaction at a time. What's one conversation your team isn't having because people are scared of setting something off? What would shift if instead of avoiding that tension, you held it? With presence, with breath, and with curiosity. You don't need to be a therapist to change lives. Just a little more human. If you want to know more about how to become more emotionally intelligent, then take a look at this. If there is one thing I hope you take away from this conversation today, it's this. Trauma isn't a flaw. It's an imprint. And awareness is the beginning of rewriting it. In the end, it's not about identifying who on your team is triggered. It's about creating a culture where triggers don't have to stay buried, where emotional safety is just as important as deadlines, where curiosity replaces judgment, where your nervous system can finally unclench and breathe. So here is the invitation to you. Don't just lead your team. Heal with them, grow with them, renew with them. That's where real impact begins. Gabor Mate puts it well when talking about the origin of trauma. Trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. One great leadership style that you might want to learn to help your employees develop fully is the coaching style. If you want to learn more about how to become a great coach for people around you, then check this one out.